Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 125. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for tuning in this Friday. Steelers Nation got a really good show for you all today. Just to tease it, a little bit later in the show, we'll have Paul Dehner Jr., now of The Athletic, covers the Cincinnati Bengals. We'll talk to him for a little bit to kind of go through their offseason and 2019 projections. So stick around for that later in the show. But Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Happy Friday, Alex. What's on? I mean, I feel like I got new surroundings here. Got a lot of work done to my office here the last couple of days here. Things have been going great. What's on your agenda on this Friday?
Not much. Just chilling out for the weekend. The storms have been crazy. I don't know what it's been like in Vegas, but PA's been getting hammered with like the weirdest, I shouldn't say weirdest, but just the most severe weather. Like I got trapped in my town. I live in a small town, 600 people, and there were two roads out of here, and both of them were shut down for parts of yesterday. So yeah, just kind of a weird like serial killer vibe I got for a little bit. But yeah, some super severe weather if you've been in Western PA.
All we have here is 105-degree weather, pretty much.
But it's a dry heat, right?
but it is a dry heat. Is there a Pirates game today or no?
I think so. They just finished up in Houston. How about the Buccos taking 2 or 3 from the Astros and playing really well? I'll have to check, but I hope so because they're on a roll, and I want to see that roll continue.
Absolutely. Great show today, as you mentioned, with Paul Dehner Jr. We'll be getting to him in a little bit. We got a few other things to talk about here this morning.
Yeah, let's kick things off with Ryan Shazier. And real quick, yes, the Pirates do play today at 8:10 against Milwaukee in Milwaukee. But with Shazier, hats off to our Daniel Valente for finding this story because I would have missed it otherwise. Ryan Shazier was on the Pat McAfee podcast yesterday or the other day. I'm not sure exactly what day it was. And just gave kind of an update on his status. Obviously, he continues to rehab from his spinal injury suffered in November of 2017. And he says, quote, to McAfee, Shazier does, quote, "I'm doing amazing, man. I literally can't complain. The same doctors that said I would never walk again, they're just giving me the same amount of hope and saying that if you continue with the same progress, you might be able to play again." I mean, to hear that, just even get to that point where it's now a possibility that Shazier could play again. Obviously, he wants to play again, but there's a chance he could be medically cleared to do so is nothing short of a miracle, but also a testament to the hard work he's put in and the treatment of the doctors and nurses and the support he's had from his family, the organization, and the Pittsburgh community. So, I mean, you just couldn't have a better offseason story than that one.
Yeah, look, I mean, as we said from the get-go, don't put any boundaries on this guy. Let's let the process play itself out. If you think back to the end of the, we're laying in the hospital bed, wondering if what kind of if he'd ever get back to any sort of kind of normal life, and we've seen him. I mean, it really hasn't been that long of time overall when you think about the seriousness of the injury to where he's gotten to now. Obviously, got married this past off season, was dancing at the wedding, and then there was the article in one of the papers here just a few days ago with David Furones. I think ran into him at a football camp where Ryan Shazier's trainer and really a good friend was helping putting that on, and Shazier was helping out, demonstrating all the workout equipment that he's been using himself throughout this entire process. So, look, I don't know how this is going to play out, and I would think that Shazier obviously is going to spend once again a second consecutive season on the Steelers reserve PUP list and sit out the season again. And one would think that next March, right around there, will be a very key time. When it decision making time, if you will, as far as Shazier, but. He's got several more months, almost a full year. Well, not quite a full year, 9 months or so until that happens. How much progress can he make during that time? And we'll see. But I mean, obviously, look, doctors generally want to err on the side of caution, I think. at least what I've dealt with in the past in my own personal life there. So hopefully they're not giving him any kind of false hope there, and it doesn't sound like they are. And like I said, we'll just keep our fingers crossed, but definitely. He seems upbeat, and he still thinks that there's a chance that he can make it back, and still wants to obviously have a fruitful career and potentially even make the Hall of Fame. So as long as he firmly believes that, we should stand in his corner and root for that to happen.
He did decline to put a timetable on when he may return, but I agree. You would feel like next year would be maybe the target date, or at least the first target date. Obviously, this year is out. He's on reserve pup. He's not ready to have a chance to come back and play right now. One response I see from Shazier, because obviously this gets a lot of good traction on social media and on Facebook and Twitter, and I understand the sentiment from Steeler fans. I know it comes from a good place, but very often I see from fans saying, no, he shouldn't come back. I hope he doesn't play again. And I get why people say that, because they want to make sure that there's no risk of re-injury. They don't want to see him go down, the path that he's already had to recover from. I get all that. But if he plays again, let's understand the framework of how that would happen. It would be medically cleared. It would be obviously on a very strict sense of the doctor's recommendation saying, yes, you're cleared to play. There's no chance for re-injury based off this, what happened to you before. Our doctor, Melanie Friedlander, has kind of talked about that before, saying that, it's probably wouldn't have a chance of severe re-injury based off the spinal fusion surgery that he had. And this would be a decision that, be made from his family and his doctors and all the important players, and doing what's best for him. And that's all I want. I just want Shazier to do what's best for him and what's safest for him and what's the most informed decision from his family, his teammates, and obviously most importantly his doctor. So I root for him to do whatever he wants to do whenever he feels is best for him. So I kind of reject the idea that, no, I don't want him to play again. I get the sentiment, like I said before, but I want him to do whatever he wants to do, and he seems determined to try to play again.
They're not going to let him back on that football field unless they think he can perform the way he did when he left it.
Exactly, and if the chance of injury is minimal or zero in terms of re-injuring himself.
Right, there's not going to be a gift in this process. Oh, well, you made it. You're this close, and normally, that just does not happen. Yeah. Right. He's going to have to clear benchmarks. Period, end of story. And look, I get the sentiment that we read or on Twitter and in the comments and all like that. Look, I'd be scared to death, for him, obviously, but it's his life, man. I mean, if that's what he wants to do and he can get the clearance and overcome these obstacles to get it done, God bless. All right, like I said, just sit back and watch the process, and if that's what he wants to do, root him on, fine. But make no mistake about it. It's not going to be a gift situation. Well, we'll make an exception here because you work, that's just not going to be part of it. Either he can play or he can't, and that's it, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And if he can, and that's what he wants to do, then I'm not going to be one that tells him no, because that would be just the biggest story of the decade and one of the biggest stories in football history if Shazier is able to return again. So I root for it. I really, truly do it. And I know these situations aren't completely analogous. Different types of injuries. Shazier, I think, are obviously arguably much more severe. But remember, Teddy Bruschi had a stroke in 2005, and he sat out a year or two and came back. And there was a lot of nervousness from himself, his family, and I'm sure from football fans in general when he first came back. But he came back and was able to compete again. So we've seen some of those stories before of guys suffering very severe injuries and be able to come back and get medically cleared. So I'm not saying it's going to happen with Shazier. It's going to be a long road. He's made incredible progress, but there's still a big mountain to climb. But if anyone's going to do it, it's Ryan Shazier.
Absolutely. And, look, at least he's gotten to the point where he is now. He can live a normal, healthy life, and that's so huge. Even if he doesn't play football again, he'll have that, and that's the most important thing. Absolutely, and if he can make it all the way back, great. I mean, look, just sit back and let's watch it unfold a little bit longer here.
Mm-hmm. All right, Dave. Not a whole lot of news happening this week from the team itself. Obviously, they've broken for the last vacation before training camp, which is a little less than a month away. It was announced, though, by the team that they will announce their third Hall of Honor class, which is kind of, just their Ring of Honor, recognizing the great players that may or may not be in the actual Hall of Fame, but players that were integral to the Steelers' history, and that'll be announced on July 27th, the third day of training camp. And, we could have a whole list of names we can kind of discuss if you'd like, Dave, names who could get in, anyone that comes off the top of your head of players that are deserving of getting into the Hall of Honor.
Yeah, and one would think, I guess, what is it going to be 4 or 5 again this year, or do they put a limit on? Could it be 1? Could it be 2?
Yeah, it's probably going to be 4 to 5. I don't know if they have a parameters on it though. Good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But I mean, look, when you look at the overall list, which I think is 32 in total right now, and I think they added, I think it was 5 the last time there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I don't know for sure if it's going to be 5 or if that's the what the numbers are. But when you look down this list and you think about who, I mean, look, your Hall of Famers, right? Jack Butler's already in, Damani Dawson. What about, is Kevin Green's already in? I mean, outside of that, I mean, Myron Cope. I mean, is Myron Cope a guy that's deserving?
Oh,
I think so.
Yes, absolutely deserving. Does he get in this year is more of a debate than does he deserve to get in. I don't believe there's a Steelers Hall of Famer. I could be wrong. That's not in the Hall of Honor yet. Obviously, someone like Troy will be in the Hall of Fame, but he's not currently there yet. So I could see Troy, but I do wonder about the relationship with the team and if they might want to wait. I mean, I threw out Hines Ward, Myron Cope, Heath Miller, you got Bill Cowher, Dick LeBeau. I want to get some guys before the dynasty, like LB Nickel, I think, which is someone that deserves to get in. So no wrong answers here. But, it'll probably be 4 to 5, I imagine, are going to be inducted.
Yeah, and look, you already got what is Donnie Shell's already in here, right? Yeah, I see Donnie Shell's name in here.
Good.
In here, so you would think at some point here Troy's going to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
What about James Harrison? At what point? I mean, maybe not this class, but I mean that guy is your leading franchise sack, getter. Where does he
have
factor?
to be retired. You have to be retired for 3 years, so he's not going to be eligible until whatever it is, year or 2 from now.
Right.
But he should.
But at some point, he should get in, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, Hines Ward is obviously eligible. Troy's obviously eligible. How long has Heath been gone now?
Heath will become eligible this year, so I do think Heath gets in this season because he's been 3 years. It's been 3 years since Heath retired.
Wow, where's the time going on that?
Mm-hmm.
There are no wrong answers really here. You would think Myron would be part of this class, though. If I were to bet one that I think would be a given, it would probably be Myron Cope.
Yeah, if I had to go with 5, and again, like we said, no wrong answers, I'd go Troy, Hines, Myron, Heath Miller, and then
what about Dwight White?
Yeah. I mean, again, no wrong answers here. I just don't know if I put him ahead of some of those names, and I think I'd add Dick LeBeau as the 5th one to that list.
And Dick LeBeau more, obviously from a coaching aspect, right?
Well, yeah, only from a coaching aspect in Pittsburgh, but I mean, one of the best defensive coordinators ever.
And I'm trying to think of any. I haven't sat down and mapped this out as far as writing the actual names down here. Are we missing anybody?
I mean, again, you could go through a whole expansive list. I mean, the entire Steelers history, but Bill Cowher. I have Tunch Ilkin, Billy Hillgrove you could talk about, Greg Lloyd, Keith Willis. I'm just looking at the list I wrote up the other day. Like I said, LB Nickel, you go with some guys, before.
LB Nickel would be a guy I would think that could have a real good chance of this class here.
Yeah, some readers mentioned James Ferrier, Ray Mansfield, all good suggestions there too.
Absolutely. Well, let's see. You got, as we mentioned, we got DeMarte Dawson, and we got Webby, of course, is already in. Mike Webster there. Yeah, going to be interesting here. The thing is, once again, you don't want it to become too saturated too quick. And that's good. And I forgot about there having to be a 3-year buffer, from the time they quit playing in there. So, some of these guys, I mean, as long as you're not adding 10 a year to it. I mean, I understand the initial class needed to be large, and it was. And then last year it was 5 names. So if you did no more than 5 every year, I mean, you could stretch this out for obviously a number of years here moving forward. But I really like the chances of Myron Cope at least being part of this class. I like the thought of LB Nickel as well too. And the whole thing about Troy is that thing ever going to be repaired with Troy?
Sure. But I guess the idea would be if you wait a little bit longer, maybe just as the saying goes, time heals all wounds. Maybe that's the idea.
Okay. What about and Rocky Blyer's already in, so that's taken care of there. All right. Well, that's a good start there. Let's hear from the listeners on this. Send us at least five names, no more than five names. Email us the names of the guys that you really think have a great chance of being inducted into the Hall of Honor this year. And that's going to go down. When is that? End of July, right?
July 27th. It'll be announced at training camp. St. Vincent College usually do, I think, right before practice. They'll announce it.
All right. So send us your list of 5 names or less to theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If we get enough submissions there, we'll read a few of them probably on the Tuesday show there.
Who are your 5, Dave?
I'd have to sit here and really map it out a little bit better. I don't have this list. I mean, I've obviously got the names of the 32 in front of me right now.
Sure.
And for me to add to it, I mean, look, LB Nickel I think would be on my list. Myron Cope would be on that list. Man, Hines Ward, just such a huge part of a couple, obviously a couple of the Super Bowl wins there. You would think that he would have to be in there sooner rather than later. So I would think Hines would be a third one to have a real good shot this year. I mean, how much longer can you go without Bill Cowher, on there? So there's 4 I think I could come up with right there.
Yeah, again, I think
and Dwight White. I mean, anybody from that Steel Curtain, really, But longevity and all like that. I mean, and it probably plays into it some as well. But that would be another name to consider.
Yep, all good suggestions. And like I said, I would probably go with Troy. But if I wanted to wait on Troy, maybe just hope with a relationship, then Troy, Ward, Cope, Miller, LeBeau. But now I'm looking at LB Nickel because I think every year should have maybe one pre-dynasty and one older, name that should get into that group, doesn't get overlooked. But we'll see what the names are and exactly how they want to approach it because we're not quite sure. It only being in year 3. All right, Dave. I want to talk about Javon Hargrave and kind of his future with the team. But before we do that, I want to throw it to the interview that we did with Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic, covers the Bengals as a beat writer. A great conversation with him. So we'll toss it to that, and then we'll come back to talk about Javon Hargrave.
All right, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. It is Friday, and as promised, we're starting to go through all these AFC North teams and starting to preview the upcoming 2019 regular season. We talked about the Browns last week, and this week we're going to talk about the other team in the state of Ohio. It is true, the Bengals are still in the NFL, even though probably you haven't heard a lot about them this last offseason. And joining us once again is a guy that covers the Bengals like nobody else. He's been on the Terrible Podcast several times. We get a lot of great feedback when he's on the show. He is now writes for The Athletic. That's a little bit of a change for him since the last time we talked to him. I'm, of course, talking about Paul Dehner Jr. You can follow Paul on Twitter at Paul Dehner Jr., and that's all one word, DEHNERJR, after Paul there. Paul, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Happy Friday.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm joining some of the most revered in Pittsburgh media at The Athletic too, with Ed Bouchette now over with us. Mark Caboli, of course, has been there. We've got quite an AFC North contingent going right now.
Yeah, they absolutely. The Athletic continues to grow. That's for sure. And it was interesting to see that both you and I think Jay Morrison was your other cohort over there. And I think you guys have a podcast as well. Is that correct?
Yes, kicking up soon. Actually, we're launching a ton of NFL podcasts before everything gets going. So yeah, our Bengals podcast will essentially be the same podcast that I did when I was at the Inquirer, but we're going to be doing it now at the Athletic. That's going to be kicking up before training camp starts. So yeah, it's exciting times.
All right, good stuff. Well, obviously, please confirm the rumor that the Bengals are still in the NFL.
Yeah, the only time they're heard right now, it appears to be for terrible news, like Jonah Williams tearing his labrum and being out for the season. So, Yeah, no, they made their splash, I guess, with the coaching change. And outside of that, I guess from a outside of the city perspective, they really haven't, been very prevalent as far as making any waves or anything like that. But yeah, they're still here.
All right, now taking obviously the Jonah Williams injury taking place or being announced this past week. I think that happened maybe during that final week of OTAs there with him. Obviously, big news in that regard. And as you mentioned, the hire, the letting loose of Marvin Lewis after all these years and the hiring of Zach Taylor was obviously big news. Take us through your thoughts up until really recently with the Jonah Williams news on kind of all that's transpired, with from the hiring of Zach Taylor until just the recent ending of the OTA and mandatory minicamp practices. Of your thoughts on what the Bengals got accomplished, kind of a 30,000-foot look, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, really, from the 30,000-foot look, it is you look down and everything is different. As outside of really the roster, You have a coaching staff that is now the biggest that there ever has been in franchise history. You have a head coach who just turned 36. You have an offensive coordinator who's 34. You have a defensive coordinator in Lou Anarumo who has never called his own defense before. He has one interim year in Miami in 2015 where he called plays, which is the same exact thing for Zach Taylor. So you've got a lot of inexperience on the coaching staff, but it is very, very different and a change that really, let's be honest, this organization was long overdue to get younger, to have a coaching staff that was more forward thinking, and for the first time in forever to have one that is offensive minded. And that kind of comes back, we don't know if Zach Taylor is going to be a great coach on Sundays or if he's going to pee down his leg on Sundays. Nobody knows because he hasn't done it yet before. But we do know that he is regarded as one of the most talented young offensive minds in the game, and he's kind of surrounded himself with some people he trusts in that regard. And he's got a roster that has some playmakers on it, particularly offensively, between Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd and A.J. Green and Tyler Eifert, C.J. Uzama back at tight end, and an offensive line that, despite the Jonah Williams injury, should be better. I mean, they weren't great last year, so it doesn't take much to be better. But they should have upgrades at a couple of positions because of health, because of acquisition. So, there's reason to believe. I think it all comes down to what you think it's going to come down to after health, which is the same for everybody, and that is how quickly can this coaching staff, this young coaching staff, establish themselves, find a rhythm, and get the train moving in the right direction? Or will there be a season, half a season, quarter of a season full of growing pains? We'll find out as it plays out, but I think that's going to be the difference to see how relevant the Bengals are this year or not.
Take us kind of through the draft there. Jonah Williams was obviously the big name at 11th overall. I assume that the Bengals, had he still been on the board, had the Steelers not traded up, they were licking their chops at maybe a Devin Bush there at 11th overall. Steeler fans kind of consider that payback, I guess, for the William Jackson a few years ago with them drafting them one spot ahead of the Steelers drafting Artie Burns there. But once you get past Jonah Williams, I mean, Paul, I got to admit, it kind of, Rennell Wren is a guy that Alex and I both talked about quite a bit out of Arizona State that we'd liked ahead of the draft, and Jermaine Pratt was also kind of an also run if the Steelers weren't able to get someone like one of the two Devons in this draft or anything like that. But outside of that, I mean, you kind of look at the Bengals draft top to bottom, and you kind of shrug your shoulders, no?
I guess. I mean, you can probably say that about most drafts immediately after. I mean, you see how all these guys turn out. I don't know what sort of splash you're expecting to make beyond your first couple round picks. I mean, they added 10 guys. There's a lot of volume there. They traded up a couple of times. They got Michael Jordan, who I think is a well-regarded young guard out of Ohio State, who played a ton of snaps there for their offense. Drew Sample was the most controversial pick they made in the second round because he, nationally, I don't think people were as on board with him. He sort of came out as the most, the best run blocking tight end in this class, and that rarely catches headlines or rarely anything anybody cares about. But they saw, a lot of potential for the way he was used at Washington because he wasn't used as much in the passing game, and that is more because I think they viewed because of circumstances there rather than his actual talent. He didn't drop any passes. He was able to scheme open, and I think they viewed that position and him in particular as the one real blind spot in a transition for this offense, which they want to be based off of play action, running the football, and being able to scheme people off of that. Well, you have to have a threat as a true run-blocking tight end who can also run and get himself open, a la what we saw a lot with George Kittle in San Francisco last year, which is the same type of system that Zach Taylor is going to be running, which is that Shanahan system. That type of player can really excel in this system, and they felt like they didn't have that. And so maybe they reached a little bit on Drew Sample, but they felt like it was such an important thing that they needed to fill, and he is as a perfect person to fill it that they went for it. So we'll see what kind of impact he has. I think that's probably the most notable. Losing Jonah Williams is devastating. I mean, look, this is making this offensive line better has been a massive priority for 2 years, and there was a ripple effect where they were going to move Cordy Glenn into left guard. Jonah was going to play left tackle where he dominated Alabama. And all of a sudden, with Billy Price in his second year coming back and not having health issues like he did all of last year with his foot injury, they upgraded at right guard because it's hard to be worse than Alex Redmond was. So you have John Miller, who came over from Buffalo, who's kind of an average, NFL guard, but that's better than one of the worst NFL guards. They brought Bobby Hart back, which makes people mad, but I mean, he comes back. He's at the very least will be the same as you had last year when you had a running game where Joe Mixon led the AFC in rushing yards and averaged almost 5 yards a carry. You like that. I mean, you like a lot of those things, but without Jonah Williams, it takes a little bit of the punch off of the real impact I think that you would see out of this draft class. That's part of it. The Pratt one you mentioned, I mean, their linebacker group was just god-awful last year and couldn't cover anybody, couldn't really do much of anything. They obviously finally jettisoned Vontaze Burfict many years too late. And you get Jermaine Pratt's going to come in, but they really didn't fix anything there. I mean, they have the same people. They're hoping Preston Brown stays healthy, but that's a lot of pressure on a guy like Jermaine Pratt to show up and have to play right away. It's one thing to hand those keys to Devin Bush, who's a top 10, or Devin White. But when you get into a guy who's a third-round pick, you're really asking a lot for him to potentially be an impact player. But they need him because that group was bad and they didn't really fix it. So I think that's the one weak spot that you certainly have to be circling on this team right now if you're looking at where they're at.
Did you really, real quick, were they really going to draft? Do you think they would have taken Devin Bush had he been there at 11 overall?
Not in that circumstance. No, they had Jonah Williams ahead of Devin Bush.
Okay.
Yeah.
Paul, to flip back to the offense, and speaking of players under pressure, I look at John Ross. He's had such an up and down career, mostly down, unfortunately. Last year was a weird season because he didn't have a lot of receptions, but when he did, he found the end zone. I know there's been kind of, mixed reports on how things have been going for him this year. New head coach, so he's kind of off scholarship. You have to have a third target in this offense. You have A.J. Green, you have Tyler Boyd. Is Ross that third target? Is it Uzoma? Is it somebody else? I mean, what is John Ross's outlook in 2019?
Yeah, I mean, they would love it to be John Ross, right? I mean, there's the guy you just can't you can't put anybody with better physical traits into there. What he can do to take the top off and really, stretch a defense is unparalleled and important when you're running play action. And you've got A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd out there. Somebody who could take the top off beyond those guys is invaluable. You put too much, you're a defense and you're worried about mixing, and as soon as you play action, fake it, you're worried about Green, and there goes John Ross on the deep post running 4-2-2. that's the idea behind it. Now, he just honestly has never transferred practice over to game day. For whatever reason, it has not happened for him. I would argue coaching malpractice occurred in his first year when Marvin Lewis threw him in the doghouse and just crushed his confidence. And I think didn't really have any understanding of what buttons to push with him and essentially mentally ruined him. I mean, that's been well documented. Last year, I think they found a niche for him. His quickness, people talk about the long speed. Really what made him a first-round pick wasn't necessarily, and lots of guys can go out there and run fast. His quickness and separation ability to make windows happen immediately is really special, and he did that. They found a way, and that's why he was really a devastating weapon in the red zone. I mean, his 7 touchdowns. He didn't do much else anywhere else, but once they got in the red zone, he was just breaking open, and he could just create windows. And when Andy Dalton was the quarterback, he could hit them. Not so much when Jeff Driscoll was. But so if he can take that, which he's already established, the one thing he is right now that he's shown he can be is a red zone weapon. If you can take that, and you can now find a way to add the confidence and add the deep threat and look a little more like Deshaun Jackson every once in a while. He does that in practice. Honestly, I've seen enough camps. I've seen every practice of his career, and I've seen this dude just blow away from people and get himself wide open and look like he's a top 10 overall pick. But when it's come game day, he's shrunk in the moment, and that is going to be up to this coaching staff to find a way to rebuild that guy and start it over. It's working a little bit. I actually talked to him. I have a story coming up on The Athletic next week after a conversation I just had with him, talking about he's changing his number from 15 to 11, which, oh, by the way, means you have to buy out all your old jerseys. The NFL mandates that. So this is not like some easy thing to switch your number, because he feels like this is the fresh start, and he wants it to look like a fresh start. He wants everything to feel like a starter because he feels like that's what it is, this really being his start in the NFL this year. So he's got a different mindset. Whether that plays out and he actually starts playing to that level on Sundays, we will see. But, yeah, there's no doubt their offense certainly feels a whole lot more dynamic if he's that dude a little bit.
Defensively, I think one of the strengths of this team is the safety tandem of Jesse Bates and Sean Williams. In Pittsburgh land, the debate 2 years ago was Terrell Edmonds versus Jesse Bates. Really, we just thought it was all going to be Jesse Bates potentially in the first or second round, and obviously that wasn't the case. How would you evaluate Bates' rookie year? And I thought the interesting note, and you tell me if this is good or bad, but Bates and Sean Williams both had over 110 tackles last year. I think it's the most of any safety tandem in football last year. Is that a good thing that they were around the football so much, or is that indicative of just how poor the linebackers were?
Yeah, the latter. I mean, you don't want your safeties making all your tackles. That's bad. I mean, not only are the running backs getting to the third level, but you're getting a whole lot of receptions where corners aren't bringing them down and things like that. That was the majority of that. To me, the more impressive number was how many interceptions they both ended up with coming off the year where the safeties only had one apiece. I mean, they were picking balls off all over the place. I guess that last game against Pittsburgh is a prime example where Sean Williams had a pick six, but just in their wins, Jesse Bates was making plays. You go back to when they beat the Ravens in week 2, they dominated them. Jesse Bates had an early interception. Sean Williams had an interception and also a forced fumble on the Ravens' final attempt to tie the game by hitting Joe Flacco from behind. When they were playing well, which wasn't often for this defense, those guys really did play well. It was pretty consistent. They like Sean Williams a lot here. I think they view those two guys as a strength. And, when you look at, they changed the whole coaching staff over, a massive overhaul. There's only 7 coaches remaining out of the now 23 on their staff from last year. Well, they kept the secondary coaches because they love the development of what's happened in the secondary. They love Robert Livingston and Durante Jones, and they look at guys like Jesse Bates and Sean Williams and say, man, these guys have really developed under these position coaches. We need to make sure that they stay in place when the new coaching staff comes in. So to me, that says something. That says something about how they feel about William Jackson and even Dre Kirkpatrick on down the line. that those guys, they can make plays, and that's asking a lot when you have linebackers that can't cover a soul.
When you have Jonah Williams go down like you just had happen, obviously Cordy Glenn, the early word I guess is he's going to go back to left tackle. Didn't have the best of season there last year overall, but we've seen Cordy Glenn play better in the past. I guess the early speculation is that Westerman, I think a kid that has like maybe 2 starts, will get the first crack at left guard there. I don't know what's going on with Clint Bowling so far. I guess he's dinged up, and of course they have old John Jerry come over from the Giants, who kind of washed out there. How is that going to end up shaking out at that left guard spot? And man, I mean, to me it looks like just a situation where you keep your fingers crossed that left side of the line. Look, we like Billy Price coming out of Ohio State. He's going to be a solid center for them, but that left side, it just seems like the question marks really go up, kind of a domino effect off of the Jonah Williams injury.
Yeah, I would argue in what we've seen, the small sample size of Christian Westerman, he may have been the best guard on this team last year. When he played well. I mean, if you go to Pro Football Focus in sample size, I think that included about 100 some snaps. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head. They actually had him graded as one of the top 3 guards in football. Now, granted, that's, again, a very small sample size, but,
right.
He would get out there and play really well. He's a 5th-round draft pick. He's got all the physical tools. The problem is coaching staffs haven't been thrilled with him mentally. This is the 3rd coaching staff that he will be under, and none of them have done anything but put him on the back burner, despite when he does go out there and play pretty well. And that's been frustrating for Bengals fans who love it. Actually, it's dubbed the #Westerman Hive, which engages constantly by just swarming anyone that dare disparage the name of Christian Westerman, who they believe to be, the next great guard in NFL history. So, I think seeing him get a chance is going to be a good thing, and I'm really curious to see what he looks like. They're pretty high on him, the personnel side here. So I think there's a chance that could work out okay. But really, it's mostly a battle royal. I mean, you've got a number of guys. I mentioned they drafted Michael Jordan in the 4th round, traded up to get him. They still have Alex Redmond on the roster. You mentioned John Jerry, Christian Westerman, Clint Bowling, who, I just think there's some weird injury stuff going on there. And he's also at a point in his career where he is $5 million on the salary cap and only a $500,000 dead money hit if he were to be let go. Certainly his spot is potentially in jeopardy on the team as a whole as they try to figure out what's going on with him. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be some questions there, but I think there's some reason for potential optimism. It's going to be whoever kind of comes out on top after camp, though.
AJ Gray, if you look the definition of snake bitten and bad luck up in the dictionary, I think you find AJ Green and Tyler Eifert's pictures. Those poor Tyler Eifert, man, just bad luck after bad luck. Do you consider that bad luck with just both those guys? AJ just continues. It seems like every season to miss 3, 4, 5 games or whatnot, and then we all know what happened to Eifert. Is Eifert going to be able to make it back, do you think? And I mean, they obviously went out there and drafted Drew Sample on top of it, and Uzomah's a kid that I like coming out of Auburn. I thought they got to deal with him, and obviously they re-signed him to, I think, average salary somewhere around $5 or $6 million this offseason here. But Tyler Eifert and AJ Green, talk a little bit about the expectations of those 2 players this year.
Yeah, I mean, Eifert always seems to make it back, doesn't he? It's just a matter of staying there. I mean, they're so different when he's playing, and he's always had an incredible connection with Dalton. And, when Eifert's injury was the first domino of the just calamitous injury season for this team last year, when he went down midway through their Week 4 game against Atlanta, one that they ended up winning. They're 3-1. They end up being 4-1 before Pittsburgh comes here, and Antonio Brown runs against no coverage for the game winner. And the offense was really humming. I mean, they were averaging 30-plus points a game. People were talking about how great Andy Dalton was playing. and Eifert was making plays all over the field, and then he has this the latest freakish injury where his elbow is coming out of his skin. It's just disgusting, and you feel for a guy because he does all the rehab, he comes back, and these insane fluky injuries just continue to happen to him, but he's back for one more go at it. I do believe in the drafting of Drew Sample and giving a 3-year, $18 million contract to CJ Uzomah show that I think that they do view Eifert very much as a luxury specialty piece, and I think he has to be treated that way. You can't, they said they were going to do that last year, but yet by week 3, he was out there playing 70% of the snaps. That's just not who he can be at this point when you know who he is injury-wise. He needs to be a third down, red zone, specialty package type of player who maybe plays 20 to 30% of your snaps, but they're very high leverage because you get him out there in important situations and unique packages that suit him, maybe as like a big slot, right? So you would have, instead of John Ross in your slot, you would put Tyler Eifert in your slot with A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd outside of him, and those are your 3 wides with Sample or Uzomah on the inside. Well, now you're more of a danger to run the football out of that, and you're obviously still very much a danger to throw it because most teams treat Eifert as a receiver anyway. You're already in nickel. They're already not going to switch and put a linebacker on the guy. We know that because you see it over and over again. So why not take advantage of him that way? I think you'll see this offensive staff, which is creative and all about innovation, try to take advantage of him more this way. The question is if they'll have the discipline to hold him back, because it is hard, right? You've got a guy who's a stud, and it's week 3, and you're trying to win a game, and you got to say, no, he can only play 15 snaps.
Right.
But you do have to sort of have that discipline, understanding that it's about what the big picture is going to be with him and not about trying to win right now.
Two guys that really Alex and I both like coming out of the draft a few years ago. Andrew Billings, the big defensive tackle out of Baylor. Then obviously the other one, Carl Lawson, the edge rusher out of Auburn. Billings had that rookie season of his, I think, wiped out by a knee injury there. How is he starting to come into his own now? And what's going to be the plan with Carl Lawson, man? Because when that guy is on as a pass rusher with that long arm move of his, and I mean, he just looks unstoppable sometimes as a pass rusher, despite his size there. So, where are the Bengals right now on Billings and Lawson? What are the expectations of those two players on the defensive side of football this season?
I think Carl Lawson is under the radar, the most important player on this Bengals team. People did not talk enough about, except for, I guess, probably inside Paul Brown Stadium and those of us who were connected, about how atrocious their pass rush became last year. It started off great the first quarter or so of the season, and Carlos Dunlap and Gene Atkins were really running their contract. And after that, they got zero pressure on the passer. They were one of the worst in the league in pass rush productivity. That goes across the board, and you can really dial a lot of that back to when Carl Lawson tore his ACL, and of course a non-contact dead ball against Tampa Bay at the midpoint, because he only had 1 sack. And so those that don't really understand the real numbers will point to, why are you talking about a guy like that only having 1 sack being a big deal? He led the team in pressures, right? So he was consistently forcing people into the arms of Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap, who were racking up forced fumbles and sacks all over the place because teams were really scared of Carl Lawson because they see all the same things that you do. I would argue, and I mean this knowing everybody that's on this line, I think Carl Lawson is the best pure pass rusher on this team. And I think that he can be a guy who can give you, 14.5 sacks. There's no reason why he can't. I mean, as a rookie, he had 8.5 or so in his first 10 games. And if you throw him out there and he stays healthy over the course of a year, there's no reason that he can't just be a dominant force off that edge. And I think they view him that way. He has to take that step. he's as dedicated. He's healthy. He's going to be full go pretty much at the beginning of training camp, and absolutely full go by their Week 1 game in Seattle. And I think he's the guy that we don't know his ceiling yet. And a lot of the guys on this team we do, because they have their core, their true core is older, and we know who they are. Carl Lawson has maybe the highest ceiling amongst their current young core that we don't know if he's going to get there or not. And I think this is probably a good year to see if he does. And if he does, suddenly one of the biggest problems on this team from last year is close to immediately fixed, because then Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap look a whole lot better, and Sam Hubbard as well, who had a nice rookie year. You feel a whole lot better about their whole situation when you have Carl Lawson as an anchor with double-digit sacks coming off that edge.
Paul, just 2 more questions from me. Just kind of looking a little more broadly. One of the criticisms of Mike Brown is that he's been kind of cheap, especially with the scouting staff of things. I know a decade ago the Bengals had one of the smallest scouting staffs in football. They relied heavily on the national scouting services to get their information. Has that changed over the last 5 or 10 years? And if so, do you think that's improved their draft results?
No, I talked to Duke Tobin about this a lot, who's essentially their de facto GM.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I don't need more of these voices. I need the right voices. And he feels like he has the right voices, and they don't need more people to put, too many cooks in the kitchen. And that's the way they operate. And they've had long runs of success drafting. They had, when you go back and look at their drafting success from about 2009 to 2013, one of the best runs I've seen a team drafting in this league in a while. I mean, they were hitting consistently, not just doubles, but home runs and grand slams late, in days 2 and 3, and it built a roster that went to the playoffs a bunch and flamed out, of course, but they had a bad run. I mean, 14 and 15 were total whiff drafts. I mean, really just abominations that set the team back those last 3 years. What we've seen in recent years is they've bounced back, because not everybody can hit home run drafts every single year. And I think they have a good operation. I really don't. I hear this a lot and discuss this a lot. It's very popular with Bengals fans, as you might imagine. Mm-hmm. I really don't look at it and say, man, they need more people here and they'd be drafting better. I think that they have plenty of people. I think they have very smart people that are doing it, and I think they have results that have shown that they've drafted pretty well. They actually have, I believe, more players that they have drafted than anybody else in the NFL over the last 10 years that's still in the league. And that's, that's part of them bringing the right guys in, and it eventually being hard to keep everybody on a roster. Now, they've got it all ends up being a results business. They could probably use a couple more under people maybe, but they like the system the way it's set up. And I think that's kind of, just who they're going to be. And I just don't really have a problem with what their roster, particularly the roster depth, has been over the last 10 years, where essentially Duke Tobin has kind of risen to his spot. I feel like they've created deep rosters. They've created some rosters that have been sort of the envy of the NFL for a while. Their top-end guys haven't always performed, and they obviously had the problem in the playoffs. But, I don't think it's been, wow, they're really getting out-drafted or out-scouted type of situation.
Yep. Gotcha. Last question. Nationally, the perception is the Bengals are pretty much an afterthought in the AFC North. Whether that's correct or not can be debated. But internally, from the beat writers that cover a team, from the fan base, does everyone kind of feel like this is a basement team? They're going to be a fourth-place team in the AFC North, or is there more optimism internally about that this team can try to compete for maybe a wild card spot or even potentially the division?
Yeah, I think the latter. I mean, I think they definitely. I talked to talking to some of the coaches when they came here. They said, one of the reasons they liked this of all the openings the most was when you really looked at the roster, this was not some sort of rebuild, and that goes back to them being one of the most injured teams in the NFL last year. And if you're going to be real, I mean, what chance? Were we really talking about Jeff Driscoll to Matt Langle and Cody Core? Like, are we going to take that seriously as to who this team is and like what they could be, when you don't have all these guys, they ended up, if you look at adjusted games lost is one of my favorite statistics in this realm. I think it's as good as you'll get to getting the true impact of what teams suffered the most injuries, because they weight starters and stars above your after run guys, and they even take a small percentage out for guys that play questionable and things like that. Football Outsiders does an incredible job with this stat. They've been doing it for a while. The Bengals had one of the 3 or 4, I believe they're 28th in the most injured team in the NFL last year by true impact, and they were 4-1 and 5-3 with one of the historically worst defenses in the NFL last year. And they fired Terrell Austin and fired Marvin Lewis, mostly because of that defense being coached poorly. And, if this defense can come back with, like we've mentioned, a lot of the personnel here, I don't feel like we're talking about a team whose defensive personnel is a bottom-feeding group outside of that linebacker question. I mean, we're talking about guys that are really good players, guys that are Pro Bowlers or who could be Pro Bowlers without any question. And if they can come in and be coached up right, there's no reason to believe it really will be hard for this defense to be worse than it was, right? That's almost an impossibility. They were so bad. And the offense was putting up 30-plus points a game, and now they brought in an offensive guru type of head coach to play with A.J. Green and Tyler Boyd and Joe Mixon and Tyler Eifert and all those things who I just mentioned. So the internal thought is, when this team is healthy and not being completely devastated by injury, they like the roster. And that's why what you opened this conversation with of, hey, we haven't heard from you. And that's because they kind of looked at their roster and say, I don't know, we saw a 4-1, 5-3 roster last year before the wheels came off injury-wise. So they kind of stood pat and made smaller upgrades and added a 10-man draft class and really lost nobody. I mean, and that doesn't mean they're going to be better, but at the very least, they didn't lose anybody. Who did they lose? I mean, they didn't lose anybody of any real note. We get Tyler Croft. Obviously Vontaze Burfict is addition by subtraction. So, I mean, you're talking about they didn't lose anybody. Does that mean they'll be better? I don't know. But nobody internally views it as some sort of rehab project and certain to be in the basement. I actually don't view it that way either. And like I said earlier, I think it comes down to this coaching staff. How quickly will they shake off growing pains? Will they be able to get the train going in the right way immediately? That I don't know, because it's a very inexperienced coaching staff, and it may take a year, it may take 2 or 3 for them to figure out how to make it all work right. But if they can get it going, I don't think it's a thing where, this roster is just going to be totally overwhelmed, because it wasn't last year. So there's not a lot of reason to believe that necessarily will be the case again.
All right, Paul, it's late June, and obviously a lot can happen even between now and the start of the regular season. So as we always like to say, we won't hold you to any of this unless you're wrong. Then we'll continue to hold it against. You know how the internet works, but regardless, give us an early prediction on where you think this Bengals team is and what's unacceptable. What's going to be considered an unacceptable season for the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean, I would say if Andy Dalton stays healthy, I think unacceptable would be what the Vegas under currently is. I mean, I think it'd be unacceptable to have less than 6.5 wins, considering that Andy Dalton has never done that in his career. I mean, since Andy Dalton showed up here, they've always had at least 6 wins, and most of the seasons have been in the 9, 10, 11 range. It's just fact. So I think anything less than that would be definitely considered unacceptable. And I think, they're depending on what happens with this coaching staff, and I think there's reason to believe they could be just fine with it. I don't think there's any reason that they couldn't be playing relevant games in December competing for this division. There's an interesting little quirk in their schedule that I find really interesting, because I feel like the Browns are bound to go one of two directions, 13-3 or 3-13. They just feel like an exploder.
You're right.
They feel like explode or implode, right? Like, can Freddie Kitchens handle the heat? Will OBJ go absolutely nuts? Like, if they lose some games, will that ship just go completely off the rails? We're already starting to see some of that there. Or it'll all come together, and they'll be incredible, and they're the next Chiefs. That's all possible. I don't see the middle ground very possible with them. If the opposite happens, if the Browns kind of go in the tank and start spiraling, they have the best schedule ended up with the Bengals playing 2 of their last 4 games against the Browns. So they're all in December. If the Bengals were relevant and Zach Taylor did a good job of getting the team on the tracks early enough and avoiding a lot of the early growing pains, and the Browns were spiraling, you now took 2 games against a team that would have been playing with confidence and better and all those things early in the season. You put it in the back end where if they're not doing very well and you win both those games, the division flips that way. So to say that I just think there's a very good chance that those Browns games could be relevant. Now, how good the Browns will be, certainly we'll find out. But if they're beatable and the Bengals are able to beat them, they could be in the discussion to win the division. Who knows?
All right, well, Paul, look, Steelers and Bengals obviously meet 2 times again this year. The first of 2 being in Week 4, and the second of 2 being much later in the season around Thanksgiving, Week 12 there. We're going to be calling on you again to, like we did last year, to preview these games ahead of time. And we were sorry to keep you on the line so long today, but, I mean, you're so incredibly, knowledgeable with covering this team and wanted to get the full recap of what's going on with them and all. So, appreciate the good talk today on the Bengals, and we look forward to having you on Week 4 of the season as well. And we appreciate you coming on a Terrible Podcast again.
Thank you, Paul.
No problem. Have a good one, guys.
And again, thanks to Paul Dehner Jr. You can follow him at Paul Dehner Jr., Paul Dehner Jr. on Twitter. Be sure to follow him. Let him know that you listened to the interview, that you appreciated him taking the time and his insight with the team. I'm sure we'll have him back on the show whenever the Steelers play the Bengals throughout the regular season. But good interview with him, and it was interesting to hear the perspective of a lot more optimism, and I guess that's natural, but a lot more optimism internally for the Bengals than maybe is the feeling outside in the national media.
I thought he was a little bit more bullish than what I expected him to be honest with you.
But I get it. I get the reason with the injuries.
Right, with the injury, I mean, that's a great point there. Maybe he's a little bit higher on this draft class than I am. He did it. I mean, he did a good job of selling the tight end, sample in the second round there. But I know one of the first things when going back preparing for this interview this morning, and I DM'd you about it too. I was like, man, how unappealing this draft class is. Once you get outside of Jonah Williams there, and look, we'd like the linebacker there, but make no mistake about it, the Pratt. I mean, nowhere close to. What the top 2 or top 3, I don't think in this class was. And then Ryan Finley, another quarterback in round 4. Rennell Wren is a guy that you and I both liked throughout the pre-draft process. Maybe not 4th round, maybe maybe a little bit lower than that. But outside of that, I mean, to me at least, and he did a great job of selling Michael Jordan. Obviously, they had the need for another backup running back with who's it? Mark. What was the name of the kid they cut loose? Mark
Walton.
Mark Walton there, kind of busting, blowing out already of the league, so to speak. There, and
I think he's actually back in Miami.
Is he? Okay,
They got a tryout and signed. Yeah.
They drafted 2 running backs here in Travion Williams and Rodney Anderson. Obviously, probably hoping that one of those guys makes it this year. But when you throw in just how huge that Jonah Williams injury is, and I get to talk about Westerman, and probably he should be the first guy up to get a crack at that left guard spot. And yeah, I saw his grades on PFF and all like that, but I mean that is such a small sample size. And boy, when you go back and you remember how Cordy Glenn played last year, which wasn't great, and you just think about him going to have to kick back out the left tackle there. Westerman probably going to come in and get that left guard. Just a lot of question marks really outside of Billy Price, the center. They got question marks all over that offensive line there. So I thought he was a little bit more bullish than what I expected. I get it, I guess, from him covering the team, having a little bit more insight, obviously, on that team than we do. Man, personally, the way I look at this Bengals team at the end of June right now, I think if this is a team that goes 8-8 or 8-8 or better, I think it's a monumental achievement on their part.
Yeah, that's my feeling too. Below average offensive line, below average to below average quarterback. I think most people would argue below average. Probably Bengals fans would call Andy Dalton average, and that's kind of a bad combination to win in the NFL. With the Drew Sample pick, I mean, yeah, I didn't like the pick. I mean, I think Sample can make an impact year one because he is a refined blocker. You look at Will Drisley last year for Seattle, made an impact right away. So I think there's short-term value, maybe more than some other tight ends that'll take time to develop. But the upside with Sample, I think, is really limited as kind of a number two blocking tight end, and I don't think that's who you want to take in the second round, like the Bengals did. And I feel for that organization though, because you draft Jonah Williams, who would have been a really good pick for them, would have played well. He gets hurt. You had Billy Price last year, who missed chunks of the year with an injury. You had William Jackson Jr. missed his rookie year with a torn pec. So I mean, those guys have worked out ultimately, but you just haven't gotten the immediate contribution from those guys because of injury, and that's going to be deflating to an organization.
Boy, you go back like the last 5 years, right? With even go back as far as who was the tackle that washed out already with them?
Andre Smith?
No. Later,
Fisher and Aboye.
Cedric Aboye.
And Fisher flamed out too.
Right.
I don't know if he was taking his high, but
Aboye, even his rookie season, I think, was messed up like by an ACL or MCL.
Well, I think you're right. Yeah.
Didn't
Fisher get hurt too? They've all been hurt.
Yikes!
Crazy.
I don't, man. Then you go even back further there with the Alabama kid that played tackle for him and all. But they've been snake bitten at least in the last 4 or 5 years. And as you mentioned, William Jackson with the pec, his rookie season, it just seems like every year with their first round draft pick is missing some time there. So good info. Obviously, it'll be interesting come the time that we actually do have Paul Dehner back on the show. Week ahead of the Week 4 game against the Steelers to see how much his temperature is. Are we going to be dealing? Have you looked at their schedule? Overall with the Bengals. I mean, they open up against the Seattle Seahawks. Then they have the 49ers, and look, that's a winnable game, I think, at home against the 49ers. And then they get the Bills on the road and the Steelers on the road. Is there a chance that this is what is a chance that this is a 2-1 or 3-0 Bengals team come time that they come to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, pretty remote. Is that Seattle game in Seattle? It sounds like?
Yes, it is.
So yeah, that's going to be really difficult to start the year. 49ers.
They can beat the Bills though, can't they?
Sure. They can beat the Bills, but you asked 2-1, 3-0, and 49ers are going to be. I think 49ers are going to be tough out this year. It's going to be a good team. I think it's going to be a lot to handle. So 2-1 maybe. But 3-0, I mean, I think they're losing to Seattle week 1.
Going to be interesting by the time that, like I said, when we get Paul back on after 3 games into the season to kind of take his temperature where he is then as opposed to now.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a 1-2 Bengals team when they come to Pittsburgh for the first time. Dave, let's transition to, I know we kind of touched on this a couple podcasts ago, but I just want to re-rack it and talk about it a little bit more in depth, and that's Javon Hargrave's future in Pittsburgh. And I tweeted this out yesterday. You've had a lot of debate about who's going to get an extension and who should get an extension and who should you wait on. To me, if I'm Kevin Colbert, Javon Hargrave is the number one guy I want to get done this offseason, even more than Joe Hayden, because I think what Hargrave's been able to bring to this team and the unique skill set that he has as a nose tackle is something I just don't want to lose. And I think this team does want to bring him back, but I think the biggest issue will be Hargrave knowing his playing time will be limited, and can you find a dollar amount that's going to be able to work for what he wants and what the team wants? So I do have some serious concerns about their ability to get the deal done, but I really want to get it done in the worst way.
I would agree, and fresh on the memory here, I continued on. I restarted my contextualization of the sacks from last year. Obviously, all that got interrupted by the draft, and then free agency, and then OTAs and all like that. But I'm kind of finishing that out with the top 3 or 4 sack getters from the Steelers from last season, and I just did the Javon Hargrave stuff and went through all of his pressures as well too from what Pro Football Focus had calculated last season. Man, what a nice season he had. I mean, really, what a nice season he had, especially as a pass rusher there, and especially from getting lined up over, closer, over those guards and away from that 0-and-1 technique. More so, over to his left a little bit there. I mean, you had a lot of Cameron Hayward seeing a lot of time, more over the center and inside the guard last year as well too. And I thought Hargrave did a great job of taking advantage of some situations and really working over some right guards last season. Now, he had a couple of extremely quick sacks last year. And, I think if you look at his sacks top to bottom last year, he benefited from some work that Cameron Hayward did. But, the key thing here is it doesn't matter how the sack. I think the biggest takeaway the last few days I've come away with is, man, just get that early pressure from somebody. Get that 2 to 2.5 second, pressure from somebody that forces that quarterback to pull the football down. And once you do that, being able to clean those things up should be able to happen. And Hargrave had a few of those, but Hargrave also had some nice wins on top of it there. Really, I thought came into his own last season as a pass rusher, and once again, outside of playing that 0-and-1 technique there, I think he is a guy that you got to maybe try to find a way to get him on the field a little bit more, some playing time there. And Tuitt had, and I just got done recently wrapping up his sacks as well too. If you're talking about a guy in Tuitt that if he can stay healthy, and actually finish some plays, he's going to have a good season. Now, obviously, it's going to be tough to get all three, Hargrave, Hayward, and Tuitt all on the field at the same time. But I think you can make that happen a little bit more, right?
I hope so. Or have maybe a bit different of a rotation, a little more pronounced rotation. You could have the 3-3-5 that they unveiled in Week 17. It remains to be seen exactly how committed they are to it, or if that was a game plan specific idea. But I think it certainly has a lot of value. I mean, the concern is just, Hargrave's going to look at this and saying, I'm playing about whatever the number is, 500, 600 snaps maybe on the high end of things per season, and I could go to another system where I'm going to be the guy and get paid as such and play 800 snaps a season maybe, or, more snaps at least, bottom line, whatever number you want to ascribe to it. So, that's my concern. Hargrave seeing that and saying, I'm going to have a great year this year in Pittsburgh, and then I'm either going to make them pony up and pay me like Hayward or Tuitt, about $10 million per year, or I'm going to go somewhere else that will pay me as such because they'll view me as the guy. Maybe that's in a different system. Maybe that's as a 4-3, under tackle, but I'm going to be able to get paid regardless.
Last year, 455, I think, total snaps, 43.5% of all snaps played last year. You would think at max you could get them to maybe 50%, right? I mean, if you use
and those snaps were Tuitt missing 2 games.
Right. So, I mean, you would think at most, barring, of course, more injuries taking place, if you could get him to 50%, great. And you'd have to probably take more 3-3-5, right?
Yeah, but 50% sounds like his cap. Like, that's the most he'll play as long as Hayward and Tuitt are here.
And then you also have to think, too, look, I mean, I was, what did he end up being? Third most sacks on the team last season. You would think that regardless of play, if he was to hit the 50% playing time again or that high, 43.5% or better in playing time in 2019, at minimum he's going to have 5 sacks, right? I mean, this is a guy that could hit 8-9 sacks if he had the right playing time and was used a little bit more over those opposing right guards and all like that. So you're thinking to yourself, what are you thinking if you're him? You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that $8-9 million per season,
You're not? You don't think?
Not from the Steelers.
Are you saying okay? But he's going to say someone might pay me that,
right?
He's going to argue I can be a 10-sack guy.
My thought is what the Steelers are going to offer him.
Okay, and that's why I think he might leave. Because
right, and that's what I'm getting at here. Is he's going to look at that? He's going to say, man, if I play out, if I come out and have another. I mean, even if he had a 5.5 sack, 6 sack season off of 45% of total defensive snaps played. That's a solid season.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he's getting the run stops and he's getting the pressures in there, everything that comes along with that. And look, this is a guy that runs after the football. Heck, you even have what they call it when they do. Sometimes you see the defensive tackle even drop a P dropper. I think is that what Peyton Manning calls it, a P dropper.
I don't know.
Sometimes and all, but I mean you even see him occasionally do that. As well. So he's a do-it-all guy. He doesn't have over a lot of mileage on him at this point. You would still think that he's got 3, 4, 5 good years left in him as well. So you have to kind of consider, all right, well, what are the Steelers going to offer me? $5 million? I mean, does that sound right with him? As far as what the Steelers would offer.
Sure. No, I get that. I don't know what the number would be. I'd like to think it's a little bit higher, but I agree it probably won't be $9 million per year, which is what he could command on the open market to a team that's going to play him, 75% of the snaps, because this team's paying Hayward and Tuitt $10 million per year. So from their standpoint, it's probably hard to justify paying Hargrave, a guy that's playing 30, 40% fewer snaps than those guys are, to pay him about the same. And that's the concern. The money's just not going to be right.
And don't forget that next offseason you got to pay. It's going to be Hayward's turn again. He's going to get a contract extension next offseason. You can't pay them all though, right? I mean, it makes it tough. But boy, it's going to be hard to replace him. I'll tell you that.
Oh, absolutely. When this guy's one-on-one, he wins battles. I mean, when he's against the center or the guard, as you pointed out, as you've shown in your post, this guy wins. And so imagine what he could do in a 4-3 where he's not getting, he's not having to deal with the interior guards as much, and he's getting more one-on-one opportunities and just more playing time. This is an 8-9 sack player easily. He plays good run defense, good effort, high character, prime of his career, good age. Like you said, not a lot of mileage. I mean, he's in that sweet spot to get paid and get paid a lot of money.
And we saw last year, and it happened on 2 of his sacks. He started off getting double teamed, and look, if he's drawing a double team, that means somebody else isn't.
Yeah, you're either double teaming him and freeing up somebody else, or he's one-on-one and he's going to win those battles. He's got quickness and hand use and power that's uncommon for the position.
Right, and that first sack of the season, which I kind of pat myself on the back, and it's probably why I did not get a Christmas card from T.J. Watt this year. They originally gave that sack to T.J. Watt, and it did not take but a couple of times through that All-22 tape to realize that sack that was given to Watt should have went to Hargrave, at the least being a split. And I posted that, and I let the stat service know and all like that. And I'll be damned if it got changed to a half a sack and then a full sack, I think, on that. But I mean, that just goes to show you. And he worked through kind of a double team to get to Tyrod Taylor on that one. And I think he fought through another. Was it the one against the Ravens that he fought that was a little bit longer sack time-wise? But I mean, he eventually had went through 2 offensive linemen to get that as well too, and he's going to have a few of those. He's going to have a few of those quick wins like he had against Jacksonville, and who else was it? Denver, I think.
I think so.
A couple of those as well too. And yeah, you line him up over a right guard, and you don't double team him. With him and that kind of that first quick step of his, he's going to get a couple of that way. And if you do have to double team him, I do that. I dare you, because that's going to free up somebody else on that defensive line. So I think you opened this up by saying, boy, you'd be disappointed if they don't get him done, that he should be a priority when it comes to trying to get done this summer. Yeah, I have no issue with that. I mean,
because if you wait, and we're in March, he's going to say, well, I'm a month out from free agency. I might as well just wait and see what I can get. He's not going to do a deal in March.
Right. You're going to he's going to force a hand. He's going to force you to put a tag on him of some sort. And I think next year, with there being barring something getting done with the CBA, I think next year teams can use both the franchise and the transition tag. Next year. I think I came across that in some of my reading, off-season reading, because they're not being as how, the year after 2020 there's no CB in place. I think teams might have the luxury of using both a franchise and a transition tag next offseason. I'll have to double check the write-up on that and all that I saw. But even so, I mean, a transition tag, that's nothing to sneeze about. And some team would, regardless of putting a transition tag on him, some team likely to still come away and rob him away from you. So it puts you in a situation where you're not going to, I mean, is he going to be good enough where you put the franchise tag on him? I don't think so. So in other words, if he makes it to the start of this year's regular season without a new contract, he's as good as gone.
It feels like it, unless you really sell him on the team and the ability to win and kind of those internal factors, but are external of money.
Show me the money.
No, I agree. And the last point with Hargrave is that, we talk about Tuitt, and one of the issues with Tuitt is he doesn't always finish the play. He's close, he gets a lot of pressure, the sacks don't reflect the pressure that he gets. It's the opposite with Hargrave. I only have Hargrave down for 12 pressures last year, but the dude translated those 12 pressures into 6.5 sacks, and his snaps per pressure is 18.8, which is third best on the team last year and just right below Cam Hayward and better than Stephon Tuitt. So the guy gets pressure on a consistent basis, and when he does, he finishes the play, and those are valuable, and that's why you get paid.
And we'll see what the Steelers offer him versus.
They better pony up. You can't pay. You can't throw $5 million at him. He's not taking 5. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and that might be a little bit too rich for the Steelers where they sit right now.
Yeah, and the reason why obviously I want Joe Hayden to get done, but the reason why I say put Hayden aside is Hayden wants to stay here. He doesn't have to go somewhere else late in his career and change the family life and all that again. He wants to stay in Pittsburgh. So I think you could sit here in March and say Hayden will still get done, but you're sitting here in March with Hargrave. He's testing. He's at least looking, and I think if he looks, he's going to get a more attractive offer, and he's going to be out the door.
Right. Like I said, if you don't get him signed by the start of the regular season, enjoy the 2019 season of Javon Hargrave because he's gonna be out the door.
And as you said, it's tough to replace that kind of guy.
It is. You just don't. I mean, it sounds good in theory. Well, just go draft another third-round defensive tackle. Yeah, it's easier said than done. I mean, look, what. They obviously addressed the position somewhat in a guy in Buggs this year, but I mean, there's been no indication. I mean, if you get Buggs to be a number 5, you've done good.
Yeah. He's not going to be the Hargrave replacement.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Not even.
All right. So we both say he's deserving. We both think they should. Will they get it done with him?
I'm not particularly confident. I'm honestly not. I'm not saying it's not going to get done with these things, And the thing with Hargrave is we've heard Hilton talk about his contract situation. Obviously, we've heard Hayden talk about it, Davis talk about it. I have not heard one peep of information from Hargrave at all being asked, giving an answer about his contract situation. So we're all totally in the dark on it. Doesn't mean that it won't happen. It just means I don't have any information to try to give you a feel one way or another. My guess is no, it doesn't happen, but really fingers crossed they can find a way to get it done.
I was more confident before loading back up the tape.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you get that far away from the season and you tend to forget a few things, But going back through and loading back up all those sacks and pressures this past week, I was more confident that they would have gotten something done with him a week ago than I am after rewatching the tape, if that makes sense.
Because if you had to knock Hargrave for anything, what would it even be? Where do you start? What are the issues of not paying him $9-10 million?
I think just some time of his work as a 0 and a 1, his pass rushing ability from that spot versus, I mean, look, this is a guy too you can twist and stunt with, and
oh yeah, I mean, check out, they try to do some of the same stuff with Big Dan, and they can't do it. They try, but you can't do it when you got to have the loop around and set the edge. Yeah,
I mean, and he is a guy too that even when you can line him up at that 2 or 3 and have him slant inside, and then you get what you have happen with Hayward, and he eats. He loops back over to the A gap from over the center to his left. It's just it's so hard of a poison to pick. And okay, he didn't get the sack or pressure on that play, but did he cause something else to happen? And you go through his tape and you have a lot of instances where you say, yeah, he did cause something to happen there. And I think that's look, if I've relearned anything by doing the sack contextualizations and all this past offseason, that's sacks don't matter, man. Give me a guy that can cause havoc and either cause a pressure to be created by the attention that he gets, or actually, you go through Cameron, and I hope to have that up today. I mean, Cameron Hayward, the havoc that he created last year, just not outside of his sacks alone, is just incredible. You get a quarterback to pull that football down for whatever reason after 2.5 seconds, that's huge. And Hayward's able to do that. Hargrave's able to do that, and to some degree, or to a great degree, Watt is able to do that as well too. And you cannot have enough, coverage and pressure go hand in hand. Give me a guy that can get after the quarterback and cause the quarterback to pull the football down for whatever reason, and you can never have enough of those guys. And I'd like to see him get it done. I'm not overly as confident that they will be able to get it done. Take your hat off and hand it to them if they are able to get something done with Hargrave.
And to answer my own question, just to wrap this up about what could the Steelers use against Hargrave, the only thing that they can say as an organization is that we're not going to be able to play you enough to justify that money. And that's not a good answer.
No, that's not good enough answer. That's not his fault.
Yeah, so that's the concern. But they've surprised me before with some of these deals and getting guys to stay, and you can preach the culture and the winning, and those are valuable. We'll see if it's valuable enough, but they're going to have to pay at least $7 million. I mean, at least $7 million per year if I had to throw a number out there to get Hargrave to stay long term.
You would think 5 is not going to do it, especially knowing that what he could probably get on an open market next year.
Yeah. And I guess you could say, well, Hayward's going to get paid soon, so he might get more than $10 million per year, and that will help justify it if Hargrave's getting 8. Hayward's now going to get 12 or 13, and that difference can, justify the playtime difference.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing, though. I guess where you could also justify, man, you're going to have to, and you're going to have to pump a lot of money. If defense, to me, still plays a part in winning championships, and Lord knows if this team would have had a better defense the last couple of years, they might just already have number 7 at that point. We're at a point right now where if they can maybe, we'll see how a guy like Lane comes along, obviously. But, I mean, we expect Bush to be a star, right? I mean, you don't trade up and get to 10 overall and draft a guy like that if you don't think that guy can be a difference maker. You've already got some prime pieces on. I mean, you got Watt, you got Hayward, you got Tuitt, you got Hargrave. We'll see what can happen at the other outside linebacker position there. You already got, you got Hayden in that back end. You got a first-round draft pick in Edmonds tied up. You got at least one season forthcoming out of Davis. Like I said, we'll see what happens with Lane. You went out and spent some money on Steven Nelson there. You look at the rest of your linebackers, you Vince Williams or Mark Barron. You would think that if you put a little bit more money, you're going to have to put some money into obviously into Cameron Hayward this next offseason to keep him. Maybe it's worth to put a little bit of money into Hargrave, because what are you going to have to spend on your offense here now moving forward? Really not much of anything, right? No,
is there any big contracts coming up? Nothing's coming to mind.
Villanueva,
he's got 2 years left?
Yeah, but what's the odds of him seeing another contract? Probably not.
I think they're pretty good.
Yeah, but
he's older, but he didn't start playing football till much later.
Right, but I'm just saying, once those tackles get into that 30 range,
Andrew Whitworth, I think, would disagree with you.
Right, there are exceptions to every rule.
Yeah, Jason Peters still going strong.
And the thing is, though, you're still a couple years away from that, though.
Yeah.
You know, what I'm saying is next offseason, who are your guys that you have to get signed up on? You know, I'm not talking 2 or 3 years down the line.
Okay.
I'm talking immediate where your cash flow is going to be here. I'll pull up these.
You tell me, because I don't know.
Numbers.
No one's big. There's no big name that's going to be a free agent. I mean, I'm pretty sure of that.
I mean, you got Juju right after, but that's hold on here. Let me pull him up here. 2020.
Is Vance in his last year of his deal, or has he got a year left, or another year left?
Hold on here.
All right. Well, you looked that up. I'll just say for the defense, you don't want to. You've drafted so heavily in this defense, and you've put first and second and third round picks basically in this entire group. You now want to keep some of those guys. I mean, you're in a situation where, and some of this is fine, some of it, you can understand, where you might lose Dupree, Davis, and Hargrave. All those investments you made could be gone in a year. And Dupree, I mean, everyone say, okay, that's fine, you can live with that, but you don't want to lose all those guys. You got to keep some of the guys that you spent all this draft capital in.
All right, finally got it sorted here. Let's see. Offensive side of ball. Okay, what are you doing with Finney this offseason?
Yeah. Well, Finney might just, if Foster stays and the line's the same, Finney's saying, I'm gone because I can start somewhere. I'm not going to be a backup. So he might make a decision for him.
Yeah, look, you'd like to try to get something done with Finney between now and the start of the regular season, and maybe in the. I mean, you're not going to pay him more than Foster right now.
Yeah, he's not gonna do a deal now.
Xavier Grumble, let him walk. I mean, no big deal there. Hawkins, Hawkins might not even make the team this year. Filer, I mean, look, you'd like to get something done with Filer cheap, but it's not it's not crucial that you do. I'm trying to look down through else here. Who's due?
What's Vance's situation? You got he's through 2020.
Vance McDonald, hold on a minute here. That was through this year. Man, I wish it'd sure let me sort this a little bit better here.
I can look it up on over the cap.
Let's see. Cameron Hayward next year. Okay, Alejandro Villanueva will be entering into his final. Let's see. Cameron Hayward. Let me see here.
Vance is through 2021. I didn't realize that. So he's taken care of for a while.
All right, Cameron Hayward's final year is 2020. Now, obviously, you would have to do something with him next offseason. Villanueva's contract runs through 2020 as well, too. I mean, he'll be 32 next offseason. Is he a kind of guy that you could wait and maybe use the tag on after the 2020 season?
I don't like relying on the tag because I don't know my cap situation is going to be. I don't know what the tag number is going to be. It's going to be expensive for a tackle. I'm trying to extend him a year out.
T.J. Watt, of course, would be coming. You'll have a fifth-year option that you'll exercise on him, so that's not a big deal there with him. Connor at some point, but Connor's not going to break the bank come time.
Yeah, but he's going to want, coming off a rookie deal, he's going to want, a decent amount of money. It's going to eat up some space.
Connor and Juju are two guys that will be eligible to be extended after this season.
That's what I'm saying. And Juju's definitely going to,
Juju's going to get paid. You know, I don't.
You can't wait for Juju. You can't go through.
No. Connor less so. Technically, I think offensive side of football, I think your biggest concern next offseason is Juju.
Yeah, there's no big free agent.
In a story.
Yeah, but Juju's got to get done.
Right, and that goes back to me saying, look, what are you going to put into that? What are you going to have to spend as far as cash goes on offensive side of football in the next 12 months?
But Juju will be very, very expensive.
And Juju's that.
Yeah.
I get what circling back, and not to tie up too much more time on this. Man, it wouldn't be a bad investment to make in the Hargrave if you had to spend the $8 million per season or whatnot.
If you had to pick one of the three guys I mentioned defensively that could be gone, Dupree, Davis, Hargrave, you can only keep one.
Well, I'm not keeping Dupree.
I know. Well, basically the question is Davis versus Hargrave, but I'll indulge by at least throwing Dupree's name out there.
Yeah, I'm not. Give me Hargrave over Davis too.
Yeah, I agree. But some people could argue Davis just because of the snap count, and it's not easy to find a safety. You have to draft another safety and play a rookie there. And I'm not saying I agree, but you could at least maybe state the case for it.
I mean, and look, Joe Hayden, I mean, you'd like to be able to get something done with him. Here's the thing, you know, your cash outlay with him this year would obviously be a little bit bigger, but I mean, it could be a manageable situation with him. You know, of the two people I would like to see get done this offseason, it would be Hayden and Hargrave.
Agreed. Yeah, I've said that
from this point out.
Mm-hmm. And those are the two most likely guys to get done as well. But Hargrave to me is priority if I can swing it.
And if he'll let you swing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one and the same. You gotta offer up that money. And Mike Hilton, I'm sorry, but I'm not dealing with you, my friend.
Yeah, and look, I mean, with like we just talked about, you know, you can't have them all. I mean, yeah, you'd like to, but I mean, how many players win that exclusive rights free agent war? He's not a guy that I'm losing a lot of sleep over right yet if I can't get him done this offseason because look, he's going to be you still have that RFA tag, and like it or not, that's the rules. I'm sorry if he loses out in the battle here, but he's going to have to wait. And if saving that cash on him helps me put that cash towards Hargrave, you're damn right I'm going to do it.
100%. Totally agree. So that's the future of Hargrave. It's a little murky right now, but I think every Steelers fans hope that he comes back.
I don't think it's out of the question. I just,
no, sure.
You know, just the recency bias of me watching those sacks think, oh my, you know, that kind of thing.
I think he could come back. Everyone wants him back. I'm sure he wants to be here, but the money's going to be the tough part, and that's going to be it's going to be just a tough line to walk.
All right.
All right. Dave, one more topic, and then we'll get to some reader emails. Sutton Smith, I think Pro Football Focus, big fans of Sutton Smith, says he's going to play a lot this year, and that is hard to believe in Steelers land.
Man, and people took exception to the way I wrote this up, too, right?
Did they? Oh, I didn't see that.
I mean, if you look in the comments, people say, let's let this play out, and, you know, people kind of took, I guess they kind of took issue with me kind of calling out PFF a little bit here, but and look, I get that PFF has been bullish on Sutton Smith throughout this entire process, okay, from pre-draft on. If anybody knows a lot about what Sutton Smith did as a pass rusher, it's me, because I went back 2 seasons worth and broke down all of his sacks and all like that. I've watched a lot of tape. I had to go digging for a lot of Northern Illinois tape, too, to make sure that I properly gave him his due. And even after writing up that, people said, well, you just have a bias against him, and I don't see how that, I mean, putting words in my mouth there. Look, I mean, there's a lot to like about him, but on the flip side, too, this is a small school kid, a bit undersized, or more than a bit undersized, coming out, a guy that, you know, they have even worked at multiple positions here with him, trying to make sure that they can at least carve out a roster spot for him. And here's what Ben Cooper at PFF wrote recently about Sutton Smith and his rookie season prospects. Sutton Smith is also bound, okay, put this in, here's your context. Sutton Smith is also bound to get some playing time in 2019 as a rookie thanks to a stellar college career at Northern Illinois. The Steelers found a diamond in the rough. I wonder if his agent wrote this instead of Ben Cooper. Steelers found a diamond in the rough when Smith fell into their lap in the 6th round. Boy, you want to talk about hyperbole. Even that's an understatement. Smith was PFF's second highest graded edge defender in both 2017 and 18, having nearly 30 more quarterback pressures than the next best edge defender, led to a 93.8 grade in 2017, and a combination of pass rushing and run stopping prowess gave him a 91.8 mark in 2018. And then the last sentence here: it remains to be seen where or how the Steelers plan to use Smith, but his college numbers don't lie. I guess it's a colon then. Playing time is in the cards, and I just tell me where I'm missing it here, Alex. Tell me, put me in my place here. Tell me, other than injury, how you're going to carve out more than 15 defensive snaps for Sutton Smith.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 separate ideas here. One, the idea of, can Sutton Smith become a good player? And also, can Sutton Smith help you in the short term? And you can be in that first camp and say Sutton Smith's going to be a good player and this was a steal and this guy's going to make an impact down the line, and that's fine. It's what their numbers say. They're going to be true to their numbers, fine with me. But the idea he's going to help you right away based on where he was drafted and kind of how buried he is in the depth chart, it's just not going to happen. So I'm fine with Ben Cooper saying that it's a steal and he's going to be a good player. That's his opinion. Cool with me. But he's not going to play this year. Not on defense.
I don't see how. And, there Mike Franz in the comments here all over me on this, and I think a few more on me as well, too. From a realistic aspect and a tape, look, I mean, he's a fun kid to break down. You want to talk about a kid that can get the edge and make some of these college tackles look silly? He did it. But what happens when you're in the NFL and you start playing those tackles that can get to the edge, and you start playing these starting tackles around the league that are onto that two-hand swipe of yours? Okay, is that speed and that athleticism going to be enough? How is he going to hold up against the run at the NFL level here? If they had that much confidence in him as a pure pass rusher, as a guy that they without a doubt knew could make this team as a number 3 and number 4 pass rusher, they would not be working him at fullback.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree. I mean, I think the counter to that would be most people, or Sutton Smith would say, because if you ask Sutton Smith, how are you going to handle against tackles, he's going to say, well, they said the same thing in college.
Sure.
And I dominated the MAC. So he's dominated every level that he's played at before. But it's a valid concern. I mean, I get what you're saying. Again, if you want to call, Sutton Smith dominant in the rough, fine. But, I mean, just recognize he's not playing this year. He's going to be a special teams guy. And, if he, like you said, if he gets more than 15 snaps defensively, it's a victory in itself.
I would be look, I don't blame them for remaining bullish on the player that they were bullish on through the pre-draft process. But don't try to oversell me that into what it's going to be during his rookie season. Okay? Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, the only way he sees the field defensively is if it's late in a blowout, or if something has happened to Dupree, Ola, and Chick. And really, something's going to happen to 2 injuries there at the very least, you would think, to get us on the field from a defensive standpoint. Okay, look, I have said it. We give this evaluation, Alex, and then people like we just did on Dante Moncrief. We give the assessment on him. People say, "Well, why are you hating on him?" We're not hating. We're not hating on him. We're just trying to give a realistic aspect evaluation of what to expect from a ceiling aspect from this player in this upcoming season. It's not hating on a guy to tell you that he's probably not going to play a lot of defensive snaps. With that said, man, there is not probably one other player from a young player aspect, at least in the first 2 weeks of the preseason, I'm looking forward to seeing more than Sutton Smith. Because look, we already said this guy's going to log 60 snaps a game probably in all 3 phases here. But for us to give a realistic aspect that this guy to see the field more than 15 to 20 defensive snaps during his rookie season is not us hating on a guy.
And whether you agree or not, and I suspect most people won't agree with this, is this team likes Anthony Chickalo a lot. And Keith Butler basically confirmed that after the draft, almost guaranteeing that Chick's going to be the number 3 outside linebacker this year. And I hope hopefully that changes. Hopefully Denier gives him a push. But, they like Chick a lot. And to have him and Ola there with Watt and Dupree, who are going to play so much because they're the first-round guys. Those are the guys you invested in. There's no meat on the bone left for Sutton Smith to play on defense. I'm sorry. I mean, this team barely rotates linebackers as it is. To try to think Smith is number 5, he's going to work in, is really out of left field.
Yeah, and don't take what we're saying about these guys. Look, I thought Alex and I did a great job of breaking down Moncrief the other day and trying to give a really realistic stats projection on what he can offer this offense, and we turn around and we get emails, why are you hating on him? All right, moving right along.
Well, the last thing with Sutton Smith, I had the article the other day that compared him to Spencer Larson, and if he becomes the next Spencer Larson, who is the last player to start a game both at fullback and linebacker, it was back in 2008, then awesome. And not that I'm guaranteeing Smith's going to be a starting fullback. I think Rosie's spot's safe. Nothing to do. So Smith playing fullback has nothing to do with Rosie's roster spot. But in an emergency situation where Nix gets hurt or whatever, I could see that happening. But Larson was a guy that was a good special teams player for 4 years, played out his rookie deal, and had success in the NFL. And if Sutton Smith becomes that, then great.
And look, I'm not. What we just talked about Sutton Smith is us not trying to project anything past his rookie season. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That is a now. We're going to learn some about Sutton Smith during the preseason. Probably not a lot. Alex will probably learn more about Sutton Smith once the training camp practices get underway. Remember that this is a guy that I was not there. Alex was not there either. That supposedly struggled some at the Senior Bowl, right?
Yeah, I think he was up and down.
As far as an edge rusher against some of that top better talent, tackle talent there. So, yeah, we're going to learn more about him as we go along. Probably not as much as we'd like to learn about him as a defensive player in the preseason there. Alex will probably garner more about him during training camp, but none of what we're saying in our analysis right now is about Sutton Smith past his rookie season. We're just trying to tell you what we think we're going to get out of him during his rookie season, and that more than likely will be a whole heck of a lot of special teams play.
And I do think Sutton Smith will have a good preseason, and I think he's got a good chance to make the team. Just to be clear on that.
Sure.
All right, Dave, let's finish up the show with some reader emails before we get the hate mail about Sutton Smith. We'll read some nice things before it all goes.
All right, Adam Michael writes in, hi, Dave and Alex. First of all, love the show. Been listening 3+ years at this point. Thank you for listening. My question for you is this. With highly talented receivers such as Moncrief, Deontay Johnson, Juju, and Vance, what are your feelings on the year Ben will have? Do you think it could be the best year of his career? My reasoning is we know how much Ben loves the deep ball, and he has lacked a true trustworthy deep threat since Mike Wallace, not counting Martavis or Coates, as they had major struggles with consistency. And now with Brown gone and a stable of talented young weapons, Ben will not feel the need to force the ball to one guy. Juju is a team player and will get the pick from plethora, that's one of my favorite words from three.
Really?
From Three Amigos. You've never
one of my
seen that?
Least. I've never seen it, but I don't like the word plethora.
Plethora. Golly, I wish you were older and had more movie watching under your belt. Plethora of options and be able to take his deep shots at will. Mix that in with the NFL being more pass happy than ever and Ben being more of a pocket passer than ever. I predict 2019 to be his greatest passing year ever. Thoughts? I will tell you this, Adam, a great season for Ben will be not having to throw for more than 5,000 yards, having those interceptions capped at around 10, doing whatever it takes in the red zone there and not having to drive those long fields. A good season from Ben does not have to be a good one statistically. He is going to have to do a better job of connecting with the deep ball this year. That's why Alex and I think, have said that, boy, James Washington, and I don't think we're going to get into this podcast a little bit, but Reggie Wayne thinks that Washington could have a breakout season. I think someone else has come out on record as saying think Washington will have. That's all great. You can project that all day long. We got to see it though. But if Washington can become that deep threat this year, if Ben can do the other little things that he got the ball out quick. I think you're going to see another that again this year. Use those checkdowns to the running backs. Use his tight ends maybe a little bit more. Not force the ball down the field more. I think we could be talking about now. Is it going to be offensive player of the year? Kind of stuff. No, he's not going to be in that talk anyway. But I think you could look back. There's a potential of 2019 being a year for Ben where it's been his best ever, and because it wasn't statistically better from several other aspects. Thoughts?
I mean, there are going to be some benefits. I understand maybe you force the ball a little bit less. Maybe the interceptions get cut down a little bit, especially in the red zone. But trying to sell me on the idea that Ben's going to have his best year ever, even if we're not looking at it from just a box score standpoint, in the year that he just lost the best receiver he's ever had, That's a really tough sell. I'm not going to say that.
Look,
because AB bailed Ben out a lot.
AB, yeah, you're not going to replace that. I mean, there's some aspects of that game you're not going. I mean, you're just not going to replace.
Yeah.
But I mean, if this guy throws for 4,400 yards, has 10 interceptions, and I think you hit on a great point too. Oh, man, don't turn the damn. You hate to see the ball turned over any, but man, when you're driving down in their end of the field. You just you're taking points. You're taking points off the board. If you're not having to drive the field as long, that's going to cut down on your passing yards. All right. Hopefully you're not behind having to make up a lot of those passing yards later in the game. If you can cap those damn interceptions off at 10 at the most, there. If you're doing some things if you're connecting better with the deep ball than you were, especially during the first 8 games of the season last year, and believe it or not, I think that's going to be a tough test for Ben. Ben has a lot to show us as far as deep ball accuracy this year, I think. Okay, but other than that, I mean, I think you could look back and say, man, and if he's not taking the sacks, which is something he hadn't done, a lot of lately. I think you could look back and say, man, what a great damn year, especially if this thing ends up in a Super Bowl championship.
Yeah, if it gets there, then sure. I mean, obviously, if they get to the Super Bowl, he had a great year. And I think Ben's going to be fine. I think Ben's going to have a very Ben-like year. I'm not worried about Ben.
What qualifies the best year? What qualifies that?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously pretty vague and arbitrary. Here's my concern with Ben, is that last year he had a 67% completion percentage rate, third best of his career. I could see that number drop fairly significantly this year. I think he could be in the 63% range because he's not going to have AB to catch everything for him. And I think everything he throws is going to be a lot more contested to Juju. And the other receivers don't have necessarily the best hands in the world. I mean, with Moncrief and Deontay Johnson and Switzer and Eli, I mean, I think that completion percentage could be the number that really suffers this season.
Especially more than 5 yards or really 8 yards or more down the field. That's the area where we really need to monitor, I think, the most.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true for any quarterback. I mean, that's where quarterbacks are going to make their differences. Everyone can kind of throw the check down. But yeah, I mean, I could see Ben's yard. I mean, he's going to throw the ball less, so the numbers are going to be down. Yards are going to be down. Touchdowns probably down a little bit, but it's still good. But cut the interceptions down, and that'll be helpful. But I do think his completion percentage could suffer noticeably.
Adam, we're not going to be talking about Ben having an MVP season, but I think we can look back at it and say, man, what a damn great season it was. Put me in that camp. All right, so for whatever that's worth, and it's not going to be from more a statistical. The statistics, like I said, I want to see is the lower interceptions and getting the deep ball on track. If he can do those two things, I think and everything else remain relatively the same. And obviously, the AB, you're going to miss that, especially on some third downs. I mean, you go back to that fourth down conversion against the Saints, right? You're just not going to have those kind of plays made, you wouldn't think.
Yep. But the fact that this team that been through so many red zone interceptions and this team still had a historically good red zone offense means that if he cuts down on that, they could do it again, and that's going to be huge for this offense.
All right, Richard Hudspeth writes in, I feel a lot of people – oh, here it is. Here's something else. Richard writes in, I feel that a lot of people are really underestimating this defense. In my opinion, this is the best defense we have had since the last Super Bowl. Wow. Also, the offense revolving around 2 players made our plans really transparent when facing competition. To me, that should be considered a weakness. My question is, if you could make one reasonable trade with a person that is almost positively making the roster, who would it be? I realize that this is a point where Dave will say that's too hypothetical, but it does lend itself to the discussion of how anyone believes this roster could be any better without adding a big money player. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Get Alex a new car. Got to vote for get Alex a new car there. Look, if there's one player I think that potentially still could be maybe traded that a lot of people have maybe making a roster, why not Eli Rogers or Ryan Switzer? Could one of those 2 players end up being a player that's dealt?
Maybe. I wonder where their value's at. Switzer's been traded so much. The Steelers are trading him, and teams are going to be like, why is this dude Why can't this dude just stick in a place? Eli, I don't know where his value is. I've suggested Gerald Hawkins. I think one of the tackle guys that are odd man out. I think some team maybe liked him out of the draft, had a 4th, 5th round grade on him. I've seen his talent. When he's healthy, he's played well. And if he's got a battle with Fowler and Okorafor that he may lose out on, probably the 3rd place guy right now. So no big names, but I think Hawkins could be the guy that gets cut, traded right before roster cutdowns.
Are people really underestimating this defense, Alex?
To call it the best defense since the Super Bowl, I know that bar might not be super high, but that might be overestimating and overcorrection. I mean, they just got to prove it. I mean, the talent's there, but we've said this, we've been through this before. And I got to see this defense take away the football more. So I'm not saying they can't, but I got to see it in action first.
Richard, we got to see those first 4 games, brother. Like I said,
it'll be tough.
Come talk to me at those first 4 games. We're going to have a lot better sense what this defense is after the first 4 games this year than we did last year. And I mean, plain and simple, that's it. I think when it comes to that. Brett, no, I hate to put off your email again, but man, it's just still a little bit too long here. From Bryce, Bryce writes in. This is Bryce. Want to get your thoughts on a couple things. I see the ceiling for Dante Moncrief as a Steeler. Is him being Yancey Thigpen type of player. Agree or disagree, and why? I'd like to call him more Jericho Cotchery than maybe anything. Kind of has that Jericho Cotchery, good guy, helping the locker room, kind of consistent. Not anything you're not going to make a lot of highlight films, I don't think, overall, but I think Yancey Thigpen is going back a little bit too far. I would call Dante Moncrief more of a Jericho Cotchery, who might, should be able to outproduce Jericho than Jericho's first season in Pittsburgh there. Number 2, because of the loss of Antonio Brown, do you think the Steelers should have tried to use the running back position as a way to make up for the loss of explosive scoring plays and brought in more of a speed back who can break off 50 yards run? Since running back touched the football so much, a back that is a threat to take a distance anytime he touches it could have an offset that portion of AB's game that instilled that fear in the defense. Your thoughts? Look, when were you going to get a breakaway back kind of? I mean, we were high on Justin Hill, I guess, and all like that. But how many running backs break off 50-yard runs anyway during the NFL season? B, James Conner had some. Hey, don't sleep on James Conner. He produced some explosive plays last year for the Steelers as well too. I think it's a little bit overrated as far as getting it back, that aspect of it. And I gave my thoughts on Dante Moncrief. Thoughts, Alex?
Yeah, I think Thigpen's too strong. I think it's going to be more closely to what Cotchery did. There may be some more big play downfield ability than what Cotchery offered. In terms of the speed back, I kind of argue that I would like to see the speed back, but knowing this team that they love the power backs, if you're not 225, you're not on their radar, it's just not going to happen. So I kind of wish they went with a Justice Hill. I would have been probably more in favor of that than a Benny Snell, but I fully expected them to take a big back, and obviously I predicted Benny Snell, and that's who the guy was.
Boy, we ran way long. One more.
Yeah.
Dennis writes in, Dante Moncrief, 2017 Eagles. Dave and Alex, I'll get right to it. I've been a little hacked off at how down some people are about Dante Moncrief signing. I'm not seeing that, Dennis. I got to be honest with you, Dennis. I'm not seeing people being hacked off some about the Dante Moncrief signing. I really think this is a guy who has his best football ahead of him. The Steelers system will set up for success along with obviously playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback in Ben. Look, I get the whole better quarterback thing, but they're exponentially, where's that figure in at there? My main thought is that the team is really set up to resemble a team like the 2017 Eagles, who showed that you can win with depth and shrewd signings. The Steelers look like a team that could be the sum of their parts like that one. I have no idea what some of these talking heads are looking at. It seems like you guys are playing a cautious hand too. Okay. Well, we've said 13-3 to 9-7. I mean, that's pretty broad, I think, where we're at right now. I mean, we both agree that this team could potentially compete for something this season. He's pushing his chips in and expect big things from this team this year. Best I have felt about the Steelers in years, Dennis in Las Vegas.
So what's the main point of contention? That we're being too conservative with our outlook?
I guess, and then he's a little hacked off about what people are saying about Dante Moncrief. Like I said, I don't see that. He's I have no idea what some of these talking heads are looking at. Seems like you guys are playing a cautious hand too when it comes to the Steelers. I think it's more of a look. My prediction. I'm gonna tease at the end of the show for those that stuck around all this long time. My prediction for the Steelers right now for the 2019 season, right at the start of the regular season, will be 10-6. Ta-da!
What was that intro? You said, my prediction is, you're doing like a Don LaFontaine, like in a world, we're the Steelers.
Yeah. I mean, look, right. That's where I am every year on this team. Yeah, I think that's, but on the flip side, I mean, we've already said, we think, hey, this team maybe, look, it'll be a little bit of a shock if they go 13-3, I think, where we sit here right now today. But I think that's the ceiling. I think the floor, personally, is 9-7, barring anything catastrophic happening. And a record at 9-7 to 13-3 should get you in the playoffs. And if you get in the playoffs, anything can happen.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of being too conservative or being too underwhelming with the predictions. I haven't even really had a prediction yet. With Moncrief, I don't know. We projected 55 catches and nearly 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, how much higher do you want to go in terms of predictions? So I think that's pretty fair.
Especially when, you're going to be looking to get a guy like Deontay Johnson on the field.
Yeah. Moncrief's not having a 1,200-yard season. You just can't predict that.
I mean, you're going to want to get McDonald mixed in a little bit more into this offense. I mean, Washington, your hope's going to give 30 to 40 catches season. I mean, not enough footballs to go around, and not all of them are going to go to Moncrief.
And they're going to just throw the ball less. They're not throwing the ball 700 times again this year.
No. Something's gone horribly wrong if you need him to, if you need to throw that much again.
Yeah. All
right. Sorry for running long, but hopefully it was worth it. Would like to thank Paul Dehner Jr. for coming on the show, giving us that great Bengals discussion and all. Alex and I will get we got about 3 or 4 more topics we didn't get to today that we'll cover on the Tuesday show. In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit that donate button up right navigational bar. Once again, if you want an ad-free version of SteelersDepot.com, go to SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar. Whew. Alex, have a great weekend. As always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.